Hello everyone, we've dusted off the Ubuntu On Air channel. Welcome to this community ISO testing session. I'm joined this week by Martin from the Ubuntu Marseille project and Jean-Baptiste, who works on the QA team at Canonical. And we thought we'd have a little session to go through what it takes to do the final testing. I posted about this on the Ubuntu Community Hub. If you go to community.ubuntu.com, you'll find a link to that there. It's also on ubuntuonair.com. So if you want to watch us, the quick and easy way is just go to ubuntuonair.com. If you want to join in the chat, there's a little box beneath the video which jumps into an IRC channel that we're all watching. The IRC channel, if you're a traditionalist and like a proper IRC client, is #ubuntu-on-air. And it's on the Freenode IRC network, so we'd love to see you in there. What we're going to do this session is really just go over where to get the ISO images for Ubuntu 17.10. That comes out very soon, Thursday this week.
Yep.
Which ones need testing, how you go about doing that in case of like putting it on a USB stick and booting it on a computer and installing it on a computer, what kind of things you should be looking out for, the kind of tests that we're interested in people doing. We'll do a couple of real live tests on a laptop I've got sat here next to me so you can see what it looks like. We'll talk a little bit more about the QA tracker, which is where we record all the results of those tests. So should we get on? We get on with it. You can, if you join the IRC channel, you'll find there are other people who couldn't be with us on video, people who work within the Ubuntu community. You can feel free to ask questions in there and people will pick up those questions very quickly. That'll be super awesome. And hello to everyone hanging out on IRC. Give us a wave. And I don't know if you could do emoji on IRC now. I don't know. Some sort of wave symbol or something. Right, so Martin, should we kick off with you, and you start off by telling us where we can go and get this stuff, and I'll switch to my laptop.
So I will share one of my windows here. Hopefully you can see my Firefox screen.
Yeah, you might want to zoom in a couple. Control Shift pluses a couple of times to zoom it in because it's a bit tiny text. Sweet.
How's that?
That's much better. Much better.
Right. Okay. So this is the website to go to. This is iso.qa.ubuntu.com. If you just go to the homepage there and scroll down, you'll see the current supported releases. And because of the alphabet, you'll notice that Artful is at the bottom here. If you click the Artful Final, so the release candidate images are available now. For all of the participating flavors, you will see each flavor listed and their architecture. So here's Kubuntu, AMD64, and i386. And if you want to test Kubuntu, then simply click the download icon alongside the architecture you're interested in. And that will give you links to the current ISO image that is the release candidate and alternative ways to download it. So you can just download it via HTTP or you could use one of the alternative methods.
So I've got a laptop here that I'm going to do that on. What you're seeing here is my ThinkPad test machine. So I can go down here and pick a couple of images. The cool thing here is whichever flavor you're interested in, there's an image for it and you can test that particular flavor. So if I click the Budgie desktop, for example, there's a link here. If I make my text a bit bigger, there's a link like directly to the ISO, and it's updated. It's been updated today, so the date is the 16th right now, and that's the latest image. And I'll just click that and save it to disk. So I've started that downloading. While I'm downloading that, maybe you could outline what other useful things you can do with the ISO tracker.
Yeah, sure.
So finding the ISO.
Yeah. So if we switch back to my screen here, you should be able to see you can log in through the Ubuntu SSO. So you click the login button, you type in your details. and log in, and then I'll need my magic number.
So this is the SSO account is the same account you can use for lots of different things in the Ubuntu community, and this is just one of them. It makes it easier if you just
yeah, you can log into the Ubuntu Community Hub in the same way. So now that I'm logged in, if I pick up this Ubuntu Artful again, and I'm interested today in Ubuntu Mate, so if I scroll down to Ubuntu Mate here and the AMD 64 release, these are the test schedules that we have for Ubuntu Mate. So these will walk us through a number of test cases. So if we take a simple example, install to the entire disk, we click through there, we have a series of instructions here that talk you through the whole process of the boot process and what you should do at each screen in order to install Ubuntu Mate using that particular install mechanism. It's the simplest one. And you should be able to get from start to finish without encountering any show-stopping bugs. And if you do encounter bugs, then you should file a bug or find an existing bug, and you just type in the bug reference numbers, comma separated, in these two fields here, and you can say whether the thing passed or failed.
So while you mention that, can I just bring Jean-Baptiste in? One of the things I've been asked before is how your strategy for like recording those bugs. You know, do you go through a whole run and have a little pencil and paper and sit there and take notes of, you know, I'm imagining you see more than one bug, take notes of all the bugs and then file them in batch afterwards, or do you like, you know, file them as you see them? What do you think?
Well, usually it's better to file them and you see them, because even if you can write all the details and try to remember all the details, usually you miss something or you don't have the logs, or well, data changed. So if you can file them as you see them, it's much better. But sometimes you have a bug during installation. For example, typical bug is during the slideshow. If you notice something there, then you cannot file it immediately because it's running. So you wait until it's done and you file the different bug you found. But I prefer to file them immediately. It's fresh in your head, it's fresh, you have all the data on your machine, and you have all the information required by the developer to fix them promptly.
Right. And Martin was on the ISO Tracker website, and there are a couple of links there to where you can find out how to file bugs and where to file bugs. It's not the most friendly process in the world to get a bug filed, but there are certainly plenty of documentation that details how you go about doing that.
If I pick up the Artful final again, you'll notice under each of these test cases here, when you look here, there's the link to reporting bugs, and there's a couple of things here about how to raise bugs against things that are critical to the boot and install process, and then this link here, finding the right package. So if you're testing, say, something like Firefox, how do you discover Firefox in the Launchpad issue tracker to raise the bug in the right place?
Right, and it's the same Ubuntu SSO that you would log on to Launchpad with, which is where the bugs would be filed.
Yeah, so you log in to Launchpad, the ISO tracker, the Community Hub, the Wiki, and many other Ubuntu resources, all using that same account.
Okay, so let's imagine. Oh, go on.
To add about the packages, if you have any doubt and you find a bug during the installation, file it against Ubiquiti, because we are here to triage and reassign to the right package. So it's not a problem. Better assign it to Ubiquiti than against a random package, and maybe we'll never find it because there are so many in Launchpad.
Right. So the priority is to get the bug filed, not necessarily in the right place. But if you have trouble finding the right place, there are people who can help you do that.
Yes.
Awesome. So we've downloaded an ISO, and my machine has now successfully downloaded that Budgie Ubuntu Budgie remix. Sorry, Ubuntu Budgie ISO image, and I've got a USB stick in my hand. Now, there's a number of ways we could do this, and the most straightforward way for me is there's a piece of software installed on my system called Startup Disk Creator. Now that's the case because I happen to already be running Ubuntu on this system. But we also have some tutorials. If I go to tutorials.ubuntu.com and zoom in a bit, if we filter this and show desktop, you'll find that there are a bunch of tutorials. So we don't have to go through all of this, in detail, but there are a bunch of tutorials there for creating a USB stick on a Windows machine, or creating a USB stick on a Mac OS machine, or on an Ubuntu machine, or some other Linux flavor as well. It's pretty great. It shows you exactly how to do it. And I've got a stick that I've put in. I've already done this to test the process out, but I can show you what happens. If I just launch Startup Disk Creator on my machine, what it does, and I don't know if you can see this particularly well, but I'll describe it. Top half of the screen shows that it's found the ISO image, the most recent ISO image that I've downloaded in my downloads folder, and it's found the USB stick that I've got plugged into this machine. And if I just hit the button, it says, "Are you sure?" I'm going to wipe that USB stick, and you just say yes. And it hides. There we go. So that's now writing the ISO image onto the USB stick. That'll take a little while. And actually, this is one of the first bugs we found during this process. Right there, it's kind of implying to me that it's finished, but there's no way that it copied a gig or two onto the USB stick in that amount of time. So it would be much more pleasant if this Startup Disk Creator had like a percentage bar that actually accurately represented, like, so we found our first bug already. So, we're 10 minutes in and we've got a bug, and we'll file that against Startup Disk Creator, and I'm sure Martin or someone else will pick that up.
Yeah. And at this point we often get questions along the lines of, should I be testing in a virtual machine or on a real computer? And we just wanted to highlight some of the advantages of testing on real hardware versus VMs. If we have the Ubuntu community testing mostly on VMs, we're essentially getting testing conducted on the same, in air quotes, hardware, because they're all very similar in terms of the underlying devices and what have you that run underneath. So VMs are great if you want to do basic software feature testing, but for installing and using computers, we really want to see as many people from the Ubuntu community using their computers which have a diverse selection of hardware available, in terms of simple things like, different graphics devices, NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel, but then, different USB controllers and Bluetooth controllers and all manner of things. And multi-monitors for some people, and all that sort of carry on. And we really want to see tests conducted there, because that gives us much broader coverage in terms of the hardware compatibility, and certainly something we're very interested in seeing and improving where weaknesses are identified.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's fairly straightforward sometimes. If someone has already filed a bug and it's not hardware specific, it's like, application behaves weirdly, or there's a piece of text that's incorrect or something like that. It's fairly straightforward to maybe reproduce that bug in a VM, but initially finding them in the first place, especially like you say, the hardware related ones, like, can it connect to my Bluetooth speaker, or can it hold a connection to my Bluetooth headphones, or when I insert a USB key, does it auto mount correctly, and does it auto mount in the right place, and all of those kind of things that you only really get if you install really on native on the metal. And while I can hear the shouts on the internet that you can do hardware pass through in many of the modern VM systems and pass through the calls to the GPU through the system, and you can mount USB sticks, it's not the same as running on real.
And a lot of those tests you can conduct using the live image without actually having to install. There's a few cases where that's not not possible, but Bluetooth devices, you compare your Bluetooth devices in the live session and test all of that stuff out, and make sure that the left and right speakers are actually the left and right speakers, or not inverted, or that they, they reconnect and all those sorts of things nicely. And so there's a lot that you can do in the live session on real hardware, but the more that can be done on real hardware, the more valuable it is.
So that leads to another question that we sometimes encounter about, why are you having human beings doing this? Surely, it's 2017, it's AI and cloud and everything is automated and robots should be doing all of this, all of our bidding for us. Why are we manually testing these ISO images? Why are we having human beings doing this?
Well, I think Jebel can probably talk to this a bit more. Sorry, John Baptiste. John can talk about this in a more detail, in that we do have some automated testing. But one of the reasons why we want actual people to go through this process is because people are strange and people are different, and they do things in different ways. And the test cases that do the automated testing are robotic. So we're testing the same thing all the time. So we're really testing, does it work the way we intended it to work? But people using systems uncover interesting problems that we might not ordinarily discover. John Baptiste, can you talk to the automated testing that we're conducting?
Yeah, so we have some level of automated tests, so to test ubiquity and to test also the other component like DI. It's okay until late in the release, like until we reach the beta, the final beta, because we find bugs early, and well, they can be fixed early, and the machine can repeat things again and again, same way. So each time we have a new build, they run a set of tests. But then, as you said, human behave strangely sometimes and unexpected ways, so you can break the things in different ways that we didn't imagine in our automated tests. And then there are things that are very expensive or very complex to test. For example, you want to test an LVM with encryption. You have to type a password at boot. Well, it's difficult to automate. You want to test Wi-Fi. Oh, it's running in a VM, so you have to simulate Wi-Fi or find a server with Wi-Fi card and pass through. Then, well, so there's a lot of difficulties there. You want to test a webcam. You want to test different hardware. Each time it's a new complexity. So we can cover a range of tests with automated tests, but not everything. So it's okay to use this test until now, well, or 2 weeks ago, and have better coverage on hardware, or even if a VM with a human can find different things. For example, visually, a human is very, very, very good compared to machine. You will see immediately what's wrong on the screen. If the theme is broken, a machine will have a very hard time to find it. If the font is broken, if I don't know, it's missing some image or some icon somewhere, you will find it immediately. The machine won't. So that's why we need a human review at the end of the cycle.
Great.
Also, that's the installer and the upgrades. To upgrading machine take 1 hour, 2 hours, depending on the amount of packages you have to install. And when we release, it's not only releasing an ISO, it's also upgrading from a previous release. So for Artful, it's simple because you can only upgrade to Artful from this team. For the next release, 1804, it will be an LTS. So you will be able to upgrade from Artful, but also from the Zenio. So that's a huge amount of tests. You cannot cover everything manually. It's impossible, or you will have too many gaps. So we cover most of the tests with automated tests. And at the end of the cycle, we try real scenarios, like you will install some weird packages or some snaps that we didn't think of, and then, oh, it will break in your case, but I don't know, my automated test pass. Yeah, but there is a gap here.
Right.
So we need both.
Great. So that's timed well, because right now my laptop has finished doing the copy to a USB stick. So hopefully you should see installation complete. What that means is it's put the ISO image on the USB stick. That, to me, smacks of another bug, because it's not installation complete. It's copied an ISO image onto a USB stick. I think that wording needs a bit of adjusting. So potentially there's another bug in Startup Disk Creator there. I don't know. So if I quit now and reboot my system, just to prove that that whole process worked, I'll just restart my system, and due to the peculiarities of the video capture system I'm using, there we go. You see the BIOS screen, hopefully, for my laptop. and I should be able to boot to the USB key. Now, obviously, each computer is different, and they all have different ways of picking what the boot medium is. On this particular system, I press enter, then press F12. But on other systems, you press F2, or you just press F12, or maybe you press Del, or maybe you just get a menu appear. But at some point, you're going to probably want to override the boot mechanism so that it boots off the USB key, which is what I'll do now. So if I hit enter on that, it should start booting. Now I get two options here. One, you probably can't read these, but the top one, in fact, I can't even read this because it's so small. The top one, I think, is install, and the second one is try, I think. Is that right, Martin? I think the second one was try. You're muted.
Yes, you need to do try because there's a bit more flexible options when you choose the try option. Okay.
So what I'm going to, because I chose to download the Ubuntu Budgie ISO, this is going to boot into Ubuntu Budgie. Yay, look at that. Off of the USB stick. So it's definitely booting off the USB stick because the thing that I've got installed on the hard disk in the laptop is Ubuntu with the GNOME desktop. So it boots. Oh, I chose install. I didn't choose try. Oops. Should I reboot into try? Sorry, I couldn't read the text. So I'm just going to reboot again. Oh, interesting. If you quit the installer, it switches to try. Interesting. So I'm now actually, without rebooting, I'm now in try. So I just need to tweak something because you can't see what I can see. Let me mirror the displays and hit apply. So hopefully now you can see I've booted into Ubuntu Budgie. So what would we test at this point? I guess the first test we need to run is the install entire disk. So if I start that going, do you guys want to like narrate what I'm doing? Because you know, get sick of my voice now.
So you've obviously chosen to use the welcome screen to launch the installer. The test case that you're going to run through is, again, if you choose Ubuntu Artful from the big list of code names, and you pick Ubuntu Budgie and actually click the words Ubuntu Budgie Desktop for the architecture you're interested in, you'll find that there is a test case called Install Entire Disk. And if I just screen share again, this window, you'll see that's a big script of talking you through the whole process. We looked at this earlier. So Alan is going to follow this process from start to finish. And by doing this, we're going to do the most simple install you can do of Ubuntu, which is just take the hard disk, completely overwrite it, and put a clean system on.
So basically, this is the equivalent of like next.
Yes,
finish.
It really is.
It's really, there's few options to choose. Yeah. And it's pretty quick to install. So I'm not going to tick any options in this screen. I'm going to continue to the next screen.
Yep.
Which should be, I think, disk partitioning, is it? Or is it time zone and...
It will be the disk strategy you want to use.
So this is where it's looked at my hard drive and said, hang on, there's a whole bunch of stuff on here. Yeah. Do you want me to dual boot or anything? If it was a completely blank system, then obviously these options would be different. But because I already have an install on here, so I'm going to choose this one.
Yep.
Erase disk. Now for the basic install entire disk, I don't want to choose any of these additional options, but these are certainly the two options below are encrypt or use LVM, and those are certainly options that you should test at some point. Yes. But for this initial test, I'm not going to choose it. I'm just going to wipe the disk and do an install.
The Ubuntu proper test cases has test scripts that use both of those options as well.
So we found another bug. Unless I'm mistaken, the Ubuntu Budgie logo is not a Debian logo. What do you think?
Yep, seems reasonable. We've got the Ubuntu Budgie team in IRC. They can confirm or deny that.
What confirm or deny that the Debian logo is their logo? So yeah, that's probably just an image somewhere. So I will just hit install because it's chosen. There is only like one disk in this system. Or is there? Interesting.
Well, there's the device that you're booted off.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I'm just going to hit install. Oh, actually, there are two disks in this system. There is another disk inside. So I'm just going to install on SDA. I'm just going to accept all the default options. It's chosen the time zone. That's correct. And I just continue through all of these.
Now, this is a bug here that I know about. So it should be defaulting to a keyboard layout relevant to your location that you chose in the previous screen. And it's not doing that. This is one we found last test cycle.
Well, there is a debate about it because the keyboard layout doesn't depend on the time zone. It depends on the language you choose in the first step. So, well, we tried in Xenial and the bug was still there. It's something we'll probably fix for 1804.
Cool. Okay, so I am going to override the keyboard layout, and obviously you can test the keyboard layout down the bottom before you, make sure your relevant keys are in the right place that you expect to be in the right place. Next step. Who am I? Give the password. Now, this option down here, I'm not going to tick for encrypting my home folder because we're just going through the default install. But that's another thing that is something that could be tested.
So just a comment about the installation. So this is a default installation, and obviously you did an installation in English. It's also useful to have installation in non-English languages. Because not everything is translated. Sometimes, well, it creates new bugs or crashes because you're not using an English language. So when I say non-English, that's all the languages, including Indians, Asian languages. So we find interesting bugs with these languages.
Awesome. So this is going to take a little while to install. So do you want to mention a couple of the other tests, Martin, that are listed on the QA site?
Sure. So I'll just bring up the screen share again. So if we go back to the big testing tracker and we pick up, we'll go with Ubuntu proper because there's a more developed set of test cases documented there. So when you chose the install that time, we did entire disk. There's one here I've got highlighted. It's manual partitioning. That one guides you through I want to manually partition my disk out, and that makes sure that when you choose those sorts of setups that works. The live session is a good one. So when you choose that try here, you've done an install, but the live session test basically says, go through each of the default desktop applications and make sure that they function correctly. So this is making sure that all of the applications launch, run, and as best as you can tell, function correctly. So this is a great way to actually make sure that the applications that are shipped on as default on each of the flavors work as they're intended to. It's a great way to find, things that might crash.
So I just have a comment about the live session. So, in 1710, this is the first release where we'll go with Wayland by default. Because Ubiquiti is crashing under Wayland, Wayland is disabled in the live session. So you won't have the same thing when you use the live session. You will have Xorg, and after installation, you will have Wayland. So that's a small difference, but it's important that maybe you won't have the same results.
That's a really great point. Thank you. And then further down the list here, we've got some post-installation tests. You can see there's a number of different strategies for installing and exercising the system in different ways. The post-install is good because, as Jean-Baptiste pointed out earlier, people are from different parts of the world with different languages. And one of the things this will qualify at the end of the install is it using the right locale, the correct language? Is the time and date set to the time zone that's appropriate to your region? All of those sorts of things, which are the basic things that you're actually entering as part of the install process. So did what you choose during the install actually make it into the configuration of the booted system at the end of it?
Awesome. And what was that, like 10 minutes? Not even that. It's finished installing. So now I should be able to reboot, and it should reboot into Ubuntu Budgie. Let's see. And that will really be the first test, you know, other than those other things that we spotted during the installer. This is what you would consider like critical if it actually manages to do the install, which, you know, by now we would hope we've got that nailed. But this is the kind of thing that like we're looking for, is critical issues that prevent it being possible to install the system. And if I log in, you can see, if I can remember my password, we should have an awesome Budgie desktop. So I'm just going to press a button to switch to, so you can see what I can see, because it's done split screen. And actually, I think I found another bug in Budgie. It's not a critical one, but these options in the settings, you can toggle between them using the super key, the Windows key, and pressing the P button repeatedly. And on Ubuntu based on GNOME, that toggles between having mirrored internal and external screen, or internal only, or external only, or having a stretched desktop across the two displays. And that's a good example of something that you probably wouldn't notice with automated testing or in a VM. I only noticed it because I've got my laptop connected to this external capture device. So essentially it's two displays. And when you go through the super P cycling on Ubuntu Budgie, it never chooses the mirrored option. Now, it may well be that's already fixed. It may well be there's a bug already filed. I'll certainly speak to the Budgie guys so we can get that fixed. But it was a good example of something that I only noticed because I was doing this manual testing, and I happened to have two displays connected to my laptop at the same time. So it's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for in this type of testing.
To our point earlier about a diverse hardware that exists within the Ubuntu community and doing things different, people doing things in different ways.
So I guess one of the questions there is, like, you know, we found a few bugs. What do we do? Like, Jean-Baptiste, what, you know, if a user finds a bug, and, you know, you've said go and file it straight away, you know, make some notes, or, you know, follow one of the steps that are on the ISO tracker. How do they know where to file a bug? You know, how do they know where to go in order to capture that information in a kind of like summary? Where should they go?
Well, to file a bug, you go to, there's a wiki. I don't have, unfortunately, the link handy, where we explain how to file a bug, how to provide the right information, and so on. The easiest way is the link you pasted earlier, is to use Ubuntu Bug. Ubuntu Bug is a tool to report bugs and will capture the right information for you. So all the log and so on. What is important for us are all the steps you need to reproduce this bug. The reproducibility of the bug is the most important part of the bug report. This way, thank you. This way, a developer can reproduce it on his machine, and it's much easier to fix it afterwards. So the steps to reproduce must be as clear as possible. Then, what is the result you expected? Because sometimes maybe it's not a bug, it's something you think is a bug, but it's a behavior, maybe it's an expected behavior. So what you expect and what is the result you observe. And the testing environment is also very important to us. Maybe sometime will be specific to your hardware, or maybe your environment, your access point, or some other devices connected to your machine. So provide as much information as possible. So describe your testing environment, the steps to reproduce as detailed as possible what you expected and what you observed. You use Ubuntu bug to report it and send all this information in Launchpad. If you have a question about a bug, you have two channels on Freenode. One is Ubuntu bugs, and the other one is Ubuntu quality. So we are here, and we can help you finding bugs and finding very complete bugs.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So I mentioned earlier, let me switch back to here. I mentioned earlier about critical bugs. Like at this late stage, we're a few days away. We would hope at this, a few days away from the 17.10 release, we would hope there wouldn't be critical bugs that make it impossible for you to install the system. But users who are doing this QA testing, they might discover a bug, and from their perspective, they might consider it to be critical because it's critical to their workflow. Whatever application that they use on a daily basis doesn't work, or fails to launch, or behaves badly, or maybe doesn't work under Wayland, or some other issue. Do we have a set of criteria that we would say, stop the line, we need to spin a new version of the ISO, this is what you would call a critical bug? I'm asking both of you there.
Okay, I'll give you my answer, and then Jean-Baptiste could officially answer. As I understand it, we've been instructed that release critical bugs are those that prevent the install from completing successfully, or that result in a non-working desktop environment post-installation. So if you encounter a bug that is either of those things, then it's release critical and it requires a fix and the run. So Jean-Baptiste, how close to the target was I with that?
No, that's you summarize it pretty well. Anything that prevents the system from installing and booting after installation can be considered as critical, or something that causes I don't know, data corruption, thing like that. So then we can have, if you have a core application installed on the machine and that is not functional and affects a lot of users after the installation, then it can also be critical. For example, a bug we had, we identified last week, the apport, the thing that uploads crash reports automatically to errors.ubuntu.com, to the error tracker, was not on by default. So this can be considered as critical because it's very valuable information to us. We have some guidelines. I will pass them on IRC. So this is a document written by the bug control team, which defines main criteria to define the importance of a bug report. But in any apt, you attach the bug to the tracker, and then someone from the QA team will review it and set the importance. It's also sometimes very difficult to set the importance yourself because, well, for you, the bug you report is very important. But from the perspective of a release or a flavor, maybe it will not be so important when you consider all the issues you have in a release. So we have to prioritize things, and well, something that might seem important for you won't be from a release point of view.
Right. So like a piece of text in the installer, or maybe the logo being wrong in the installer, might be, a glaring problem for someone who has an eye for those kind of details, but it doesn't stop you installing the system and using it on a daily basis. It might be frustrating, and it might trigger some people's, feeling that things must be pixel precise and perfect, but it's, it's not what we would call critical, right?
Yeah, so don't be frustrated if the importance is downgraded or not as high as you would have expected. It's considered as a whole, and as all the bugs in the release that we know, and what is important for the release and what is not. And if it's not fixed for the release, it will be for next, or it will be fixed as an SRU. So it's not lost. It's not completely lost.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So do we have any questions from our friends on IRC? Anything that wasn't clear? Hopefully you saw what I went through.
We've been answering questions as we've gone along, so I think we've dealt with most, and some of the other community members have helped other people out, so I don't think there's any outstanding at the moment.
Right. So really what we'd love to see is if you pick your favorite flavor, or pick one of the ones that you don't know very well, because as you saw, I haven't installed Ubuntu Budgie 17.10 at all this cycle, and so me doing it just then, a couple of things that I saw that maybe the Ubuntu Budgie developers didn't see, because they look at that screen every day, and so it's sometimes you get a blindness to these kind of things that you're looking at all the time. It's a fresh pair of eyes on maybe one of the lesser used flavors of Ubuntu, or maybe one that has plenty of users, but just a fresh pair of eyeballs on it would be super useful.
Yep. And in conclusion, it's really about a diverse set of people with different languages, different backgrounds, different hardware, that's really going to add value to the testing that gets conducted.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at the laptops on the desk behind you, and I would imagine there's some quirky hardware going on inside those machines. And
yeah, there's a selection. Yeah, and that's just today's batch. I have a couple of others lined up for tomorrow, which are a little bit older and more interesting. Yeah.
Excellent. So as Jean-Baptiste said, if you need any help finding bugs, there's an IRC channel, Ubuntu-bugs on Freenode, and there's the QA channel, Ubuntu-quality. You can also find the desktop team on Ubuntu-desktop, and don't forget there are also server ISO images, possibly less glamorous because it doesn't have a nice, pretty graphical user interface, but still, one of our product portfolio, so it's a good idea to get testing on the server ISO as well. Report your feedback. Let us know how you got on. Feel free to ping us if you get stuck. We're always around on IRC, or you'll find us all over the internet. So thank you, Martin. Thank you, Jean-Baptiste, for joining us. And thank you, everyone on IRC. And let's get testing. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.